Welcome to episode 89 of the Twig Snapper Podcast. Today we have a very special guest. He played 14 pro seasons, 13 of them in the NHL with 930 total games, 468 goals, 831 points, 1,556 PIMs. He played for the Leafs, the Blackhawks, and the Sabres. Captain of the Leafs, three-time 50-plus goals scorer, Mr. Rick Vaive. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Wow, quite an introduction. I didn't know my numbers were that good, but I guess.
Well, I think a career like yours deserves a good introduction.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had a lot of fun doing it, and a lot of great times and great teammates, and not so good times when Harold Ballard was our owner. But other than that, you know what? At the end of the day, I got to play 13 years in the best league in the world, and not too many guys could probably say that. So I was very, very fortunate.
Yeah, exactly. So many guys are excited just to get to play one game in the league, that the dream come true. Well, we got a lot to talk about here, through your long career. And I guess I wanted to start with, you were in the 78 World Junior Cup.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like compared to the World Juniors now? I mean, there's such a huge, deal now. Was it that big back then, or was it a smaller scale?
Well, I think probably a little bit smaller scale, although that year was pretty popular because that was the first year they picked an all-star team. It used to be the Memorial Cup winner from the previous year would play in that. They picked an all-star team, and of course we were based out of the Forum in Montreal. And they took all the weights and that out of the Montreal Canadiens weight room and put stalls in there. So that's where we dressed, and we showered in their showers and walked around their rooms. So, and then got to watch them practice a lot. And of course, we had this little kid from Brantford who tearing up the OHL at Sault Ste. Marie named Wayne Gretzky, who replaced Bill Derlego, who hurt his knee. And then he ended up winning the scoring in the tournament. So it was a lot of fun. It was great. We only won the bronze, but I think if you look back, all those stars that came over eventually from Russia to play in the NHL were on that team.
Yeah.
And the same with the Swedes, and they won the silver. And all the guys that eventually played in the NHL from Sweden were on that team. So we had a pretty good team, but they were pretty darn good too.
Right. Yeah, that's the one thing you look at, world hockey, and you can say, well, geez, all these teams are so good. Only one of them is going to get gold. But to get second or third to that team is obviously an impressive accomplishment when you look at the players that are on those rosters.
Yeah.
Your first season pro, you were in the World Hockey Association. So was that your plan, coming out of playing junior hockey, you were going to go play in the WHA, or did you kind of know where you were going to go coming out of the, junior hockey experience? How did that all unfold?
Well, not really. I kind of, that was my third year junior would have been. I had a year of junior left, and then I got the opportunity. Bill Waters was our agent. There was 6 of us that had the opportunity to sign with Birmingham in the WHA. And my junior team actually offered me a lot more money under the table. But I just said, it's not about the money. It's about playing against men, about trying to get better, and,
right.
Learning how to play professional hockey and learning how to live professional hockey on your own. So that was the whole part of it, was just go down there and try to get better. And I'll tell you what, it was one heck of a year. We had a lot of fun. Had a lot of penalty minutes that year. Got the shit beat out of me a lot of times. But because the year before, Birmingham had all the tough guys, and
right.
then they were all gone. The only guy we had left was Dave Hansen, and he couldn't fight everybody. So, we just had to kind of stick up for ourselves as 19-year-olds. And when you're playing against guys that are mid-20s, late 20s, that are a lot bigger and stronger, you're going to get beat up a lot. But at the same time, by doing that, you're showing them that you're not going anywhere. You're not going to intimidate me. And it worked. I had a pretty good year, and then, got picked 5th overall by Vancouver the following year.
Yeah. Speaking of, having a good year, you were in a group of young players nicknamed the Baby Bulls, and most of you went on to have pretty, successful NHL careers, but you were all playing in that WHA team.
Yeah, you look at the guys: Rob Ramage, Craig Hartsburg, Michel Goulet, Gaston Gingras, Keith Crowder, but he left in November to go back to Peterborough because he wasn't playing much. And then our goalie, oh gosh, I can't remember his name now. I believe he played for the London Knights, and he went on to play in Atlanta and then Calgary when they moved to Calgary. So, yeah, I mean, you look at that, and we all lived in the same apartment complex, which was really good because, we were always together. I mean, when you're 19 years old and you're playing with a bunch of guys in, like I say, in their late 20s, early 30s, you kind of don't really do the same kind of things, and you live a little bit differently. And so it was good that we were all living together and got to drive together and that sort of thing.
So, after that, did the WHA folded that next year, right? So you were all declared draft eligible. Like you mentioned, you were drafted 5th overall. Did the NHL draft, did they have a kind of a ceremony where you all went and then, you got your name called, you went up there and you got a jersey or a hat or whatever, kind of like they do now, or was it more low key?
No, well, actually that year, because of the merger, the draft wasn't until August, and it was a phone draft. Okay. So the GMs were on the phones, I guess, and they did it that way. So I'm sitting in Prince Edward Island waiting for a phone call, wondering where I'm going to get drafted. And then I got the call, and I really thought I was going to Washington 4th, because they were the only team that had spoken to me. And I really thought that I was going to be going there 4th, but they picked Mike Gartner. Pretty good pick.
Yeah.
I mean, right. I can't argue with their choice, but then I got the call, and it was Vancouver. And my first thought was, holy cow, like my parents are going to start watching the game at 10 o'clock at night. I mean, like, this is going to be awful. And, and it didn't start out very well in Vancouver with Harry Neal as the coach. And I don't know, I wouldn't say Harry and I didn't get along, but he, for some reason, didn't like the way I played, I guess. And then lo and behold, in February, Bill Derlago and I get traded to Toronto for Tiger Williams and Jerry Butler. And then all of a sudden, boom, everything started to click, and it was great after that.
Right. That's where you had the most, success throughout your career. You were obviously there the longest, and you had those 3 50+ goal seasons. One of them, the 54, which Austin Matthews just broke that record. What was that, 2 years ago now? It wasn't this past season.
This past year, the year before.
Yeah. So when you had your, those 50 goal seasons in a row, I mean, after the first one and then the second, did you expect to keep having them? Did you want, like in your head, like I've got to hit 50 goals next year because I've done it 2 in a row now?
Honestly, I never really thought about it like that. The year before I got 54, I had 33, and I thought, okay, I want to get a little bit better, so maybe I can get 38 or 40, and boom, it was 54, and then 51, and then but I never really thought about it that way. I just said, look, hey, you just got to play the same way you've been playing for the last 2 or 3 years, and everything's going to come together. And that's kind of how I looked at it. I didn't feel any pressure to do it. I just knew that, I had to score goals for that hockey team. If I wasn't going to score a goal, Billy wasn't going to score a goal, our chances of winning decreased, by quite a bit of percentage. So that's all my thinking going into each and every game.
Yeah. So your record stood for quite a few years until Austin just broke it. Did you speak with him at some point after he broke it? Did you meet up with him or anything?
I did, actually. It's funny because it stood for 40 years, which is unbelievable.
Yeah.
didn't expect it to last that long. And then when I broke Frank Mahovlich's record of 48, he came down to the room the next day and got pictures taken with me, congratulated me. So I wanted to do the same thing. Austin is a great player. He's a good kid. And, you know, I wanted to make sure that I got down there to see him. So he broke it on a Thursday night in Dallas. They were playing Montreal at home on Saturday. So I got to see him before their pregame skate in a room away from the dressing room and speak with him for a while. And it was great. And the funny thing was, I said to him, I said, well, you may as well just keep going and get 65 because nobody on this team is going to break it other than you. So, you know, that might stand for another 40 years. And he just laughed, and we had a good time. We had a good chuckle, and it was really good to get down there and be able to do that because Frank did it for me and I wanted to do it.
What did he end up getting that year? 60. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that record should hold for quite a while at 60.
Oh, I would think, like I said, he's probably the only guy on that team right now that would have a chance to score 60 or more goals. I can't see anybody else on that team scoring that many goals.
No, I agree with you. So it's going to be another, long wait until there's another prospect that comes up eventually someday and tries to break that record.
Yeah.
So you were captain of the Leafs at a pretty young age. Mm-hmm. How did they pick that? Were you voted by the team? Was it the coach's decision? How did that come about?
Well, that's another funny one. It's usually they'll bring you into the, I don't know, GM's office, whatever, with the coaches and whatever, and say, we'd like you to be our captain. What do you think? And that sort of thing. That's not the way it went. Daryl got traded to Philadelphia. Probably 3 days later, Harold came up to me and pointed his finger into my chest, said, "You're our captain." And I was like, holy cow, wait a minute. I'm 22 years old. And but at the same time, I'm thinking, if I say no to Harold Ballard, he's going to trade me probably within a week.
Yeah.
And, I had already been traded. I loved Toronto. Things were going good. I didn't want to go anywhere else. And so I said, okay, I can do this. Now, it was tough, but I was lucky. I had Boreas Salming, the late Boreas Salming, God rest his soul, sitting right to my right in the dressing room. And he helped me immensely get through a lot of things in the dressing room. Like when I spoke up and guys said things, he would stand right up and say, "Hey, hold on. This guy's our captain. You listen to him." And I'll never forget the help that he gave me.
Yeah, that is, lucky to have a guy to help you in that situation. It's hard enough to be a young player in any professional sports league, and then you get this, tremendous amount of pressure put on you to be the captain. And it would have been, I'm sure, much harder if you didn't have him kind of there to help and, stick up for you too. Because if he wasn't there and you said something and a bunch of guys, got in an uproar and you had nobody to defend you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had an older team when I was named the captain. And then probably about 2.5 years later, we got a lot younger. They got rid of a lot of the older guys and then they drafted Wendell and Courtnall and Lehman and all these guys came in. So we got a lot younger. It was a little bit easier for me at that point. So, but Boria helped me through the toughest times.
And then you ended up losing your C because you missed a practice.
Yeah, it was in Minnesota. They made a 7:00 a.m. practice. Why, I have no idea. But the funny thing was, John Anderson was my roommate for several years in Toronto. Then he got traded to the Nordiques, and they were playing. We got into Minnesota on a Thursday. I think we were playing either Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon. I can't remember. And so I waited for John to get out of the rink, and then we went out and we had bite to eat and we had a few beers, and I was home at 1:00, and
yeah,
I might have had a few too many maybe, but Greg Carrion was my roommate at the time, and he woke me up and he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, yeah, I'm good. Sat up on the bed, and then as soon as he walked out the door, I put my head on the pillow and went back to sleep. Probably, I have very few regrets of my career. That's obviously one of them. But I think it could have been handled a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Dan Maloney was a coach at the time. I think it was his first year as an NHL coach. Jerry McNamara was the general manager, and of course Harold was the owner. So I thought the penalty was a little bit harsh for the crime, so to speak.
Yeah, that's what I was, thinking when you said that. It seems like they could have gone at it a different way. You were the captain for multiple years. It wasn't like it was your first year as a captain and then you did this and they took it away from you. So I mean,
if I was a coach, Dan, like if I was Dan Maloney, first thing I would have said, I would have told the press that I was sick. Then I would have went back to the hotel. I would have came to my room and I would have said, listen, I got your back this time. As far as anybody knows, you're sick.
Yeah.
But don't let it happen again.
Right.
And I think a lot of things would have happened because if he did it that way, he would have got a lot more respect from me. I wouldn't say I would have played better. I would have, I always played hard, but it might have been a little more extra in it after that if he had done it that way.
Do you think part of it was the fact that he was a first-year head coach? He was trying to make an example out of you. This is what happens when you miss practice. You get slapped, with a pretty harsh consequence.
Well, I think so, but I think mostly it was Jerry McNamara, and I think he was a GM for probably, I want to say maybe 4 or 5 years at that point. But I think it was him trying to say, okay, I'm going to make my mark here, and I'm going to, I'm going to come down hard on him, and then Harold Ballard's going to look at me as a good general manager, a tough general manager. I think that was what did it, and he made that decision. And like I said, I just think it was pretty harsh for what exactly happened.
Yeah, I agree with you. So after your time with Toronto, you were traded to the Blackhawks. Did you have a feeling at any point that was coming? Like, hey, I'm going to get traded here. I just don't know where.
Nope, had no idea. I love Toronto. I never asked for a trade, nothing. I didn't expect it. In fact, we were at a golf tournament for Telemedia Sports, who owned the, I think the radio broadcast at the time up at Horseshoe Valley. And Bill Waters was my agent. He was there. And I finished the round of golf. It was a charity tournament kind of. And I walked in and he said, I'm really sorry, Rick, but you just got traded to Chicago. That was 3 days before training camp. So I had to drive from Horseshoe Valley back to Don Mills, where I was living at the time. I had to pack up, and the next day I had to drive to Chicago for camp. And so I was a little bit, I wasn't bitter. I was very, very, very disappointed because I didn't want to leave. I loved Toronto. I loved playing in the Gardens, wearing that sweater, and growing up a Canadian kid. You want to play for a Canadian team, and that was very, very disappointing for me. Yeah. Until I saw my first paycheck.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure, obviously, like you said, it was disappointing, but you got to play with some incredible players. Mm-hmm. I saw your post about Steve Larmer and, not being in the Hall of Fame, getting to play with a guy like that. And then when you got to Buffalo, some of the guys that were on that roster too, some phenomenal players that you got to play with towards the end of your career. Did that make it easier in a sense, once you kind of got to play with some of these guys?
Well, Chicago was a little difficult. I mean, I had good line mates with Savard and Larmer, and I still think Steve Larmer should be in the Hall of Fame. 1,200 games, over a point a game, won the Calder as the Rookie of the Year. And if you win an individual award and you've got over a point a game and you've played 1,200 games, and not only that, he was one of the best two-way forwards in the game back then. I think you deserve to be in the Hall of Fame.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I'm surprised that his name doesn't even get brought up anytime I see it every year. It's like, oh, here are the guys that are eligible that we think are going to get in, and he's not even mentioned. It drives me
No.
crazy, but it was a great year for personally and for our whole line. All of us scored over 40 goals. We had a, we didn't have a great year, but we made the playoffs. Bob Murdoch was our coach, and we lost a tough first round series of St. Louis in the first round. And then, all of a sudden, well, it was Alan Eagleson, who was Mike Keenan's client, because you could represent coaches and players back then. He gets fired in Philadelphia, and of course, him and Wirtz were like this in Chicago. Calls him, says, if you don't sign Keenan, your rival in St. Louis down the road are going to sign him. So they, Wirtz panicked, signed him right away before Murdoch they didn't even tell him. He found out from the press. And that was kind of tough when he came in, because I don't know, for some reason, he just didn't think I could play. And I was pretty disappointed. And, I knew at that point, after about a month and a half, 2 months, because I wasn't playing a whole lot, I knew I was going to get traded. It was just a matter of where and when. And unfortunately, it just happened to be the day after Christmas when my in-laws were in from PEI. My wife was pregnant and we had a 2-year-old, and I didn't see them until February 4th. That wasn't very good, but you know what? But I went to a good place in Buffalo, and we had some good years there. The 1 year we finished second overall in the whole league. Played with a lot of really good guys there. Mike Foligno was, Lindy Ruff, Mike Ramsey, Christian Rutu. I mean, I had a lot of fun in Buffalo. It was a great place to live. The education for our children was excellent, and playing in the old Odd was pretty cool because it was small and everybody was on top of you, and it was loud, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed Buffalo.
I saw you had a picture on your Instagram of a trading card where you're wearing thing around your neck, and you posted, that play linebacker for the Bills. What was with that style choice?
Well, I had injured my neck. It was in a game against the Rangers. Adam Graves was on the Rangers, and there was a puck at center ice, and I got knocked down, and I was reaching for the puck, and he didn't see me, and he was skating, and his knee caught my neck, or caught my head, and he twisted my neck. So the doctor thought that would be a good thing to put on. And then later on, I saw a specialist, and he said, no, he said, I don't think you should be wearing that, because if that happens again, it's probably going to make it worse. And so I've dealt with neck issues ever since that game, and still do today. And the guys got a big kick out of it. They called me RoboCop and all that kind of thing. It kind of it lightened up the room a little bit when I started wearing that, and then I wore it probably for half a season, and then I didn't wear it after that.
Yeah, that's funny. You got a few new nicknames out of the situation. So throughout your NHL career, you had multiple seasons where you made the playoffs, and obviously playoff hockey is what everyone wants. It's the time of the year when there's people who don't watch hockey unless it's playoff hockey. It's more intense. It's more exciting. What were your playoff experiences like?
Well, I mean, the funny thing is I hear a lot of people say that the 80s was the worst decade of Maple Leaf hockey ever. And I look back and I think, okay, wait a minute. I played there 7 years. We made the playoffs 4. We went to the second round twice and lost in game 7. I don't think that's that bad.
No.
They've won 1 round since 2004, I believe.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that those 7 years were a little bit better. And then, of course, later on in the late 80s, early 90s, they got even better. Went to the conference finals a couple of times in 92 and 93. But that was a lot of fun. I mean, I think the best time was the time we finished 4th in our division, the old Chuck Norris division. and Chicago finished first. I think they finished like 38 or 40 points ahead of us. And the first round was a best of 5, and we swept them 3 straight. We won the first 2 in Chicago, came home and won. And that was kind of what happens when you're that, don't have a year that well. And we were so far behind them. A lot of the season ticket holders did buy their playoff tickets, so they went on sale to the public, the real fans, right? And so we come back and we're up 3 or 4-1 in game 3. Obviously, it's getting late in the game. We're going to win the series, and all of a sudden they start throwing brooms on the ice and everything. It was like, it was probably the most exciting time in the Gardens in I don't know how long, and so that was kind of neat. And again, going to the second round twice and losing in game 7, intense. So I will say that it's a completely different style of hockey. And then in Buffalo, I got to go to the playoffs a few times. I don't think we got to the second round. But I remember one in particular. We played Montreal in a 6-game series, and so I'm on the power play in front of the net. And I got Chelios on this side, and I got Ludwig over here. And the puck was in the Ludwig corner. Chelios comes in, and he's cross-checking me like crazy. Puck goes over here, and Ludwig comes in, he's doing the same thing. And Patrick Waugh whacking me in the back of the leg with his goalie stick at the same time. And I look at the referee in the corner, and he goes, "No." And I go, "All right, well, what the heck do they have to do to get a penalty?" And, but that, first of all, that was the way the game was played pretty much all the time back then.
Right.
But in playoffs, it even got, it revved up a little bit more. And that, but I'll never forget that series, because that was, they took a pretty good punishment in that series.
Yeah, take a good beating. And the game has changed so much in that respect. If you look at, when you played to now, or even if you look at 15 years ago to now, it's changed so much.
It changed big time after the 2004 lockout, I think it was, right? And then the next year of the draft, there was a lottery for everybody, and Pittsburgh lucked out and got Sidney Crosby. And the game changed completely, right away. And it's changed even more since then. But like it's funny, I watch a lot of the games and see guys going down the wing and then cutting right into the middle of the ice and down into the slot. And I'm thinking, holy cow, if you did that in my day, Scott Stevens or someone would be coming across to take your head off. And there's no way you'd be doing that back then, because, if it wasn't Scott Stevens, it would be someone else that would be coming across to get you. Yeah,
it's just, and a lot of guys argue about if it's going in the right direction or the wrong direction, the game with some of this stuff. And I think a lot of it has to do with preference, what people want. The people who love fighting are angry that there's less fighting, less tough play. The people who love the fancy goals couldn't be happier, because there's all these kids with this crazy skill. You got Connor Bedard, who was just drafted, Connor McDavid, all these guys that really good stick work, and they can just do crazy things with the puck. So it depends on who you ask.
Yeah, I mean, well, my personal opinion is the game is much, and I say faster. I think that's largely because they took the red line out, no 2-line passes now. I would like to see them put that back in. I think it would make the defense have to make better plays and not be able to go around the net and fire it all the way up to the far blue line. And I do like a little bit more physical play myself. But the skill level is off the charts. It really is. I mean, you look at Matthews, the way he can score.
Oh yeah,
things that he can do, and Marner, and that's just a couple of guys in the league. I mean, you look at Zegras, you look at McDavid, you look at Draisaitl, and now Bedard, and even Crosby, even today, is still pretty darn amazing. And so the game has evolved a lot, and you know what? I don't know whether, the one thing I will say is that if you scored 50 or more goals, multiple seasons in any decade of NHL hockey. You could do it in any other decade. You would adjust. If you took Rocket Richard and put him in today's game, he would train like the guys do today. He would find a way to score 50 goals.
Right. Yeah, it's a good way to look at it. I like that.
Yeah. I mean,
so no, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, like, you look at Mike Bossy, I played against him in junior for 1 year. That was another good story. I go back to PEI in the summer, and I'm out with a couple of my buddies. We're at a bar and we're at a table, and there was a table right beside us, and there was 4 guys that came in from the country there that work on a farm, and they're sitting there and they're arguing, and this one guy's an Islanders fan, and he goes, "I can't believe we took that frog from Laval," and I'm going, and I'm thinking, that's Bossy. And so anyway, it went on and on and on, and finally I said to the guy, I said, "Hey, come here for a second." I said, "I'm going to tell you right now. First of all, I'm pretty sure he's going to play with Trottier. I don't know who else he's going to be on his line, but if he stays healthy, he will score 50 goals in his first season." And the guy said, "What the hell do you know?" I said, "Well, I played against him all year this year in the Quebec Major Junior League. And, sure enough, he scores 50 or more, 60 a bunch of times, his first 9 seasons in the NHL. I mean, so the guy was a pure goal scorer. And, and there's a lot of guys in the league today that can score like that.
Oh yeah. If you look at today's numbers and you look at the top guys, there's so many guys getting over 100 points and they're scoring just a crazy amount of goals. And it's really insane when you look at it. And I think a lot of it is due to, like you said, the speed and just different way people are playing. There's, I had Mike Zook on a while back, and he was talking about how if you tried some of those fancy moves, you would have been sent down to the minors. There would have been no question that you would have sent you right down.
Well, I played against Mike in St. Louis, and I think if you tried some of those things, and imagine trying those against Billy Smith or Hextall back in the day, like the Michigan or something, like they'd probably chop your arm off. Like literally, I'm not kidding. I mean, they probably would. And Mike is right on. Like, I mean, well, first of all, you wouldn't even try that back then because, like Mike said, you probably get benched or sent to the minors. And back then they had a thing called recallable waivers, which means they put you on recallable waivers. Nobody ever claims you because they know they're going to recall you, so they could pretty much get anybody to the minors if they wanted to. So I think Mike was right. If you tried that crap and back when we played, the coaches would be, okay, get them down to the minors.
Yeah, it wouldn't have mattered if you scored on it or not.
No.
So when did you decide that it was time to retire? What led you to that decision?
When nobody wanted to pay me anymore. I wanted to keep playing. I signed with Hamilton, Vancouver's farm team, the Hamilton Canucks, as a player assistant coach. I think their plan, just from from talking to them and everything, was that they were hoping I was going to play well, and then they would sign me to an NHL contract and bring me up. Well, first practice of training camp in Victoria, I broke the scaphoid bone in my wrist and ended up with a cast for 14 weeks. And when I got the cast off, they x-rayed it, said, "Oh, it didn't really heal. We're going to have surgery." I said, "No, you're not. Just make me a leather brace and I'll finish the year." So long story short, if I can make it short, Ottawa and Tampa are coming in the next year. That was the year that I signed with Hamilton, but I was in Buffalo and I wasn't playing, and I asked them to send me to Rochester because I wanted to play because Ottawa and Tampa were coming in. And I made a big mistake. I didn't get an agent. So I called Mel Bridgman, who's the GM in Ottawa, and Phil Esposito. I called them both about 10, 15 times, never got a call back or anything. So Dale Howardchuk was my roommate and my neighbor in Buffalo. I knew that he was tight with John Ferguson, who was the director of player personnel or something with Ottawa. So I said, would you call him and have him give me a call? He said, sure. So he called him, and Fergie called me. And I said, look, Fergie, I just want to keep playing. I was born in Ottawa. You know, I said, you're bringing in a guy who everybody's going to know right away. And I said, I'll play for the minimum salary, with at that time was 120,000. And I said, you know, we can work on, you know, bonuses and that sort of thing. And he said, really, you'd play for that? And I go, sure. I want to keep playing. Plus, you know, I was 49 or 59 goals away from 500. So I was hoping that I could get to that mark. And anyway, he said, okay, well, let me talk to Mel. I think that's great. And he called me back about 4 days later, and he was irate because Mel said, no, I'm not signing him. He took a guy, can't remember his name right now, but one of the tough guys from Chicago, and signed him for 350,000. So Fergie was a little pissed off, I would say, when he called me back. And you know, and then that was it. And then the next year was the year I signed with Vancouver, their farm team, as a player assistant, and only played 36 games that year. And you know, again, no one wanted to sign me after that, and I ended up getting a coaching job in Charleston, South Carolina, in the ECHL right away. And that was it. I got the coaching bug and went off and did it.
Yeah. You actually had quite a bit of success in the coast with your coaching, won a championship.
Yeah.
You know, talk about coaching after having a long playing career. Is it easy to start coaching? And, you know, you've got all this stuff you can pass on to these younger kids, or, you know, just the guys that are in the coast, or was it harder because you were a player for, you know, now all of a sudden you've got to learn to coach?
You know, it was kind of both. It was, the first thing I did was I took a short psychology online course, and I bought 5 books on psychology and sports psychology, and I read the heck out of them. So I knew how to read players really well. I knew how to talk to them. My communication skills were really good. The toughest part was standing on the bench, and when you're losing and not being able to go out there and do anything about it. It was like, you know, that was tough. And I was yelling at the referees a lot and everything. And then Andy Van Helleman, who was the director of the officials in our league, came by one day and he said, Rick, he said, you know, just keep your hands in your pocket. Don't wave your hands and scream at call them over and have a conversation with them. Crack a joke, do something funny. You'll get a lot more out of it. So we were playing a game and we had 3 penalties in a row, and 2 of them were bad. So I called, Terry Koharski was the referee, and I was going like this, I want to talk to you. And he looks, he goes, oh. So he skates over, and I said, you got to look at that blonde over there by the penalty box. And he goes to turn his head, and I said, well, don't look now. I said, you know, people are going to start wondering what we're talking about. I said, but when you get a chance, you got to look at it. Like, she's beautiful, right? And I got my hands in my pocket, and I'm just talking to him nicely. And I said, oh, by the way, 2 of those 3 penalties were horse shit. He goes right to the penalty box and pretends he's talking to the guys in the penalty box. And then he goes to his position and he looks over at me. He goes, ooh, like this. And then all of a sudden we get 3 power plays, like boom, boom, boom. And so I kind of learned from Andy. And then from that point on, it got a lot easier for me. And then from there, I ended up in St. John, Calgary's farm team in the American League. The ECHL was a little bit easier because I built the team. I brought in the players. I could get rid of the players, you know, as quick as I could bring them in. And I had full control over everything. American League's a little bit different. You got a boss, and they brought in this stupid rule the year I went to St. John that you dress 16-2 unless the coaches agree to dress 17-2 or 18-2. Well, everybody we played said, "Oh, I only have 16 players and 2 goalies," because we had a pretty deep team. We had a deep lineup. We had some good young players that we had drafted in Calgary, and so I had to sit a lot of those guys out some nights and play the veterans just so we could be competitive. And I would get heck from my boss, who was the assistant GM in Calgary, and then he said to me, "I want you to write a review on every player after every game, and I want it faxed on my fax machine, and I want it there when I wake up in the morning." So here I am, even if I'm on the road, I got to write everything out, like on every single player that played that night, which ended up being pretty much the same every game. And if we were on the road and we were driving home, I had to stop in my office at the rink when we got there to unload the equipment, fax it to him to make sure he had it in the morning. So, and if we were on the road and we were staying overnight, I had to fax it from the hotel. But it was a little bit different, but I enjoyed it. It was, I enjoyed working with the young kids and, trying to make them better. And I had Marty St. Louis there. I had Jaguar there. I had some guys that have had great, and they didn't think St. Louis could play in the NHL. We went out there for meetings after Al Coates and Polano got fired, and we all went out there and reviewed the whole system. And they all argued with me that St. Louis couldn't play in the NHL. And I said, "Oh, I totally disagree with all you guys. I think you put him with the right players, he'll be a 30 plus 30 goals, assists. I mean, did I think he was going to win scoring championships, Stanley Cups, Hall of Fame? Maybe not. But I knew he could be a good player in the NHL. And lo and behold, he won a couple of scoring titles. He's in the Hall of Fame. And so maybe I knew what I was talking about."
Yeah, he ended up with one heck of a career. Those other guys certainly misjudged him.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was the hardest working guy every practice, every game, and he just wouldn't give up. And wasn't the biggest guy, but his legs were so big that he was so powerful down low that he could get away from bigger defensemen in corners because he was that strong. And from the core down to his legs, he was might have been the strongest guy in the American Hockey League.
Yeah. So after that, you coached one season in the OHL, totally different animal, more about guys who want to make the push for pro hockey, these prospects, kids, and completely different animal than what you were dealing with in the coast and the AHL, because those guys were already part of a system.
Yeah, but I think I would have been okay if, and no disrespect to Trevor Whiffen, who was my agent actually at the time as a coach and a lawyer, and he was Don Cherry's lawyer, and he ended up being the general manager. Well, and he would admit it today that he shouldn't have been the general manager. I mean, he wasn't a hockey person. He didn't really, fit that mold. He called me twice and I turned him down. And the third time he called and I said, "Okay, Trevor, everything with the contract is okay, the money, everything, but I'm worried about Don." And I said, "If you put in my contract that I have to be involved in all the final says of all hockey decisions, I will gladly come and coach there." So he did. But when I got there, then, whatever I thought, Don thought differently, and he did whatever the hell he wanted to. And he left ugly messages on my machine after games. Like I would leave at about 11:30. He knew I was gone, and he'd leave a message. I'd get it in the morning when I'd come in to watch the film. Anyway, bottom line is I never really had a say in anything. And then after 1 year, he fired me. And for 7 years, I sent out resumes, 25 or 30 a year to all different leagues, never got a call back. And I am 100% sure that he had something to do with that. If anybody called him, said, "What do you think?" Like we're looking at him, and he probably would
give you a bad review.
Shitty coach.
Yeah.
Don't even interview him. He's a shitty coach.
That sucks, that whole situation. It's just a shitty situation and then like you said, you kind of probably screwed you up for any other coaching opportunities that you
Yeah, he
had. You didn't
did.
even have a,
And I love coaching. I really
yeah,
did. I really loved it. And I think if you exclude Mississauga, the Ice Dogs, if you take Charleston or South Carolina Stingrays, we were called, and St. John, even though one year in St. John we were 500, the other year just a little under 500. I think my winning percentage in those 7 years as a minor pro coach were over 600.
yeah.
So, I mean, I think I might have known a few things about coaching. So,
Oh, you won a championship in the coast. You had a good winning percentage. I mean,
yeah,
couldn't have been clueless.
no, but I mean, when you don't make all the decisions in
Right.
junior hockey, and I'll give you one example was Jason Spezza, and hell of a player, but
Yeah.
so we're in a hotel room before training camp, and Bobby Orr's there, who's his agent, and Don, and we're talking, and they go, "Oh, by the way, you're really going to have some trouble with your captain, who was Spezza." They named him captain at 16 or 17. I can't remember how old he was. And I said, "Well, why is that?" And they said, "Because he's really lazy." I go, "Well, then why did you make him captain?" That doesn't make any sense to me. But
Yeah.
anyway, so the season starts, and I bench him in Sarnia for the second period. I played him in the third. Best player on the ice. So I thought, well, maybe I'm getting to him. And then about 4 games later, we're playing in Kingston. He was on the line with Brian McGrattan and Chad Wiseman. And they were a good line. But they would blow the zone a lot before the puck came out and get, then they keep it in. And we got 3 guys at center ice. And so anyway, I benched him for the whole third period. And he demanded a trade the next day. And it came down to Sarnia, Windsor, and I went and watched both of them play 3 games. And Sarnia, they were giving us 3 players. They were giving us 2 17-year-old really good forwards and an 18-year-old defenseman that was big and strong. And I thought that for sure was the best trade of the 2. But Don's best buddy, who was our head scout, lived outside of Windsor. Well, we had a meeting, and he was there at the meeting, the head scout. And when I left, we were making the trade with Sarnia. And it would have made us a better team, instantly.
Yeah.
And so the next day I come in and I asked the trainer when the guys from Sarnia were coming. He goes, Sarnia. I said, no, we made a deal with Windsor. He said, we what? So anyway, that's kind of how it went there. And
yeah. Oh, I could tell, when you started telling that story, you weren't going to get the guys you thought you were going to get.
no. And one guy was Himmelfarb, and there was another guy, played mostly in the American League, but played a little bit in the NHL, a centerman, real nasty type player, played hard. And then the defenseman was a big defenseman. Don't think he ever played in the NHL, but he was a very good junior defenseman. Big, strong. And it was funny because that's the summer before I took the job, we made a trade with Kitchener. We got this defenseman. I mean, he was very, very slow, didn't turn very good. So Don came to me in November, I think it was, late November. He says, I want you to play this guy. And I said, are you asking me or are you telling me? And he thought for a minute and he says, I'm telling you. And he liked him because every time he got the puck, he just fired it off the glass. So, you ever heard Coach's Corner? He loved defensemen that threw it off the glass. So I said, okay. So I played him. I played the heck out of him for 3 games. I think it was like a -20. And then I didn't play him after that. And I never heard another word about him. But, so it was a rather tumultuous year for me as a coach. And, I tried my best. But, again, it was, then he fired me at the end of the year, and then he didn't want to pay me my second year of my contract. And I mean, the whole thing was just a
shit
debacle.
show. Yeah. It's hard to win as a coach if you don't get much say in the decisions that are being made. And,
Yeah.
it's just not much you can do.
And the funniest part about it was, I mean, we won 3 games all year. Don took over the next year and they drafted a couple of good players in the draft, and he won 6. So, we went from 3 to 6. Boy, Don, you're a great coach. You doubled the wins, but
Yeah.
but still didn't make the playoffs.
Yeah. Well, that had to make you feel good somewhat, knowing that, they thought they were making this great move by firing you and hiring him, and that he didn't have any,
Yeah, you know what? It didn't matter to me. I was over it by then, and
Yeah.
it's funny because I saw him at different events after he fired me and stuff. I just go up to him, "Hey Don, how's it going? How are things?" And I could see his mind going. I could tell that he was thinking like, "Well, what's he up to?" Like he's being nice
Yeah.
to me. He shouldn't be being nice to me, but that's just the way I am. I don't.
Right.
I hold a grudge for a little while, but not for long.
Yeah. It's better to not hold a grudge, to
No.
be friendly, to be kind, all this
Yeah.
this stuff, and that's what, makes nobody is benefiting if somebody holds a grudge. I mean, you're going to be miserable because you're holding that grudge, and then the other guy's still going to be, it's just nobody wins in that situation.
No, you're absolutely right, and it's not worth it. It's I mean, if it's going to keep you up at night and it's going to make your life miserable, why hold a grudge?
Right.
It's not worth it. And I've let a lot of things go that happened in my career and my coaching career and everything. I could have been very angry at a lot of people, but I never got angry that I held a grudge or anything. So, it is what it is. It happened. You deal with it. You're pissed off, but you let it go eventually and move on.
I'm sure you're a lot happier now than you would be if you would have held on to all of it.
Oh, absolutely. If I was miserable and still pissed off at all the people that I did get pissed off at, I'd be a miserable old bugger, I'll tell you. I don't think my wife would want to live with me if I was that angry.
Oh, there's just a couple more things I want to touch on here before I let you go. And one of them is in the early 2000s there, you started playing and coaching in, Allen Cup hockey. How did you get into that after not playing for quite a few years? What made you want to play at, some level again?
I was playing in a lot of alumni games with the NHL alumni, Leaf alumni, and then there was other tours like, I don't even remember the names of them back then, but so we're playing a game in Hamilton, and Don Robertson, who runs the Dundas Real McCoys, was there. And I could still, I was 40 years old, but I guess in those games I looked pretty good. And he said, "Would you like to come and play for us?" And I said, "Yeah, why not? What the hell?" I mean, it gave me like $100 a game or something to cover your gas and that sort of thing. It wasn't like I was making any money, but I still wanted to play competitive hockey.
Right.
But then when I got out there and I'm playing against guys in their mid-20s that play college hockey in the US or American League, and then they come here and play, I'm going, "Oh my God, am I in the wrong spot here?" So anyway, then during the lockout, he asked me if I would coach that would have been, I guess that would have been 2004. And or maybe it was the one before that. Anyway, he asked me if I would coach the team, and I said, "Sure, I'd love to." And I talked to Donnie. I'm still good friends with him, and we talk all the time. And in fact, I was supposed to go and do the color for the Allen Cup final.
Oh, okay.
Which Dundas actually won. I didn't know that till someone told me not too long ago, but I knew they were hosting it, and he wanted me to do the color for the final game. And I said I would, but then an appearance came up and I was out of town and I couldn't do it. But so we stay in touch, and probably most of our conversations are about senior hockey, which is something that is kind of fallen by the wayside because like I remember when I was a kid growing up in PEI, there was senior leagues in the whole Maritimes. Like there was like a league of 10 teams, and senior hockey was so big back then. The Allen Cup was almost as famous as the Stanley Cup back then.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and it's just as old almost. In fact, I think it is. No, actually, I think it's older than the Stanley Cup. And but it's not very popular anymore, and it's kind of disappointing.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
You know, I don't know. You know, maybe because of a lot more minor pro leagues that kind of popped up. You know, like I got a son that plays in Cincinnati in the ECHL, and he's going to be 34 in July, and you know, he's played almost 300 games in the American League, 700 regular season professional games, 6'6", 245, big left winger. Told him one time, I said, if I had your size for 1 year and I could go back in time and beat the shit out of all those guys that beat me up, I said, I would love to do that. And but anyway, and then you got a lot of other, you know, semi-pro leagues and stuff that have popped up in the US and stuff. And I think that's probably why senior hockey is not as popular, because a lot of those guys are going there and playing senior hockey. They might be making 100 or 200 or 300 a week. And maybe down there, they're making 800 or 900, and it's US dollars.
Right.
So that's my take on it. You know, I think that's probably the number one reason why senior hockey's kind of, you know, falling off the cliff, so to speak.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, I didn't think about the fact of all the newer minor pro leagues and all that stuff could be having an impact.
Well, below the ECHL, I think there's 3 professional leagues in the US. You know, so, I mean, that's, you know, there's probably 8 to 10 teams in each of those leagues. Well, that's a lot of hockey players that have to fill those rosters. Right. And those are guys that would be playing senior hockey in Ontario or Eastern Canada or Western Canada if they weren't given that opportunity to make a little more money in the US.
Yeah. Good points. One thing I wanted to just touch on quickly, we mentioned the World Juniors, but you also played in 2 World Cups. So you got to wear the Canada jersey multiple times, represent your country, which is one of, you know, most hockey players' biggest dreams, is to be able to put on their nation's jersey. Just wondering if you could kind of touch on that quick.
Pretty incredible. And those were the 2 years we didn't make the playoffs out of my 7 years in Toronto. And so the first year it was in Finland. And I remember it like it was yesterday, because back then it was 8 teams. You played 7 games in the round robin. You played every team, and those points would carry over to the medal round of the top 4 teams. So Russia would go 7-0, you know, and all their points would carry over. But anyway, we go into the medal round in Finland, and we're doing okay. And the last game is the Russians against the Czechs. And the Russians hadn't lost a game. And the Russians, you know, always held on to the puck, never gave it away. They were dumping the puck in, they tied 0-0. So they get the gold, the Czechs get the silver, we get the bronze. But fast forward to 85, that was in 82. In 85, like, we go to Prague. And the Czechs are hosting, and they win the gold. And we beat the damn Russians out for the silver. We beat them in the medal round game to take the silver away from them. So that was kind of a little redemption for us. Yeah. But you know what, putting that sweater on and representing your country, and, you know, and looking up in the stands in Finland and in Prague and seeing, you know, 1,500, 2,000 Canadian fans from Canada there, you know, it just makes you proud to be a Canadian and play for your country. And
just incredible moments you'll never forget.
No, I will never forget those moments. They're fantastic memories. And we also had a lot of fun too as a team, because it was a mixed match of players from a bunch of different teams that didn't know one another. But by the time we left Finland and Prague, we knew each other pretty darn good.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you did.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
In
you
fact,
mentioned, oh no, go ahead.
no, one of the years, I think it was, yeah, it was in Finland. I mean, the Canadians got beat out, the Oilers got beat out, like several big teams got beat out in the first round. So they
Yeah.
always, took over, guys that probably weren't going to make the team, or used guys that were playing in Europe and, for the exhibition games and everything. Then they would fill the rosters in with the guys that got beat out in the first round. So, I mean, we got a lot of really good players after that. And then I remember in Prague too, it was Mario Lemieux's first year in the league. And he came over and he got homesick. He wanted to go home. So we had to all take him out and try and convince him to stay. And Mario, we really need you here and everything. And he ended up winning the scoring race in the World Championships in Prague. So I'm sure he's happy that we convinced him to stay, and
Yeah.
something that he'll remember, when he gets to my age.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. That's funny that
Yeah.
he wanted to leave and then he ended up
Yeah.
scoring all.
Yeah. And probably the only guy that I think, had he not been injured, had he not had the cancer, and what was it, 3.5 years he didn't play there
Yeah.
at one point. Probably the only guy that I think might have had a chance to break Wayne Gretzky's point record.
Oh yeah, definitely. If he
but-
would have played the whole time, I mean,
Yeah. And
who knows what he could have done.
But I can't see anybody breaking that now.
No.
I mean,
No,
he's got more assists than anybody in NHL history has points
Yeah.
alone. I mean,
Right.
who the heck's going to beat that? I mean,
No,
there's some great players in
Yeah.
the game today, but are they going to be able to play, 20 years, 22 years and put up the numbers that he put up for that many years? No, I don't think so.
Yeah. I've messed around for fun, looked at numbers with McDavid. What if he scored 200 points in this many years in a row? He still wouldn't even, come close, which is crazy to think, because he's the phenom of the modern era, what he can do.
Yeah.
So it's
I mean,
really,
when you think about it, Gretzky had 260 points, I think, one year. Like who the hell's going to get 260 points? I don't see that guy coming anytime soon, right?
No.
So now, mind you, he played on pretty good teams. Played with guys like Curry, Coffey, Messier. I mean, the list goes on. I mean, they had fabulous teams, and they had a great system. They played like the Europeans. They never gave the puck up. They would regroup if they didn't have a play, and then they'd come at you with a lot of speed. And they were pretty darn good.
Yeah. Speaking of another, phenomenal player, we've mentioned Austin Matthews multiple times, and you also mentioned the fact that the Leafs haven't been very successful in the playoffs in recent years. What do you think the reason is? You look at that team, there's a lot of talent on that team, and there's been a lot of talent on that team. And this year was an improvement. What they did in the playoffs was better than what they've been able to do, but there've been so many first round exits where they just can't, you think, oh, this is the year the Leafs are finally gonna make it, and then all of a sudden they don't. What do you think the reasoning is?
Well, I think, first of all, they brought in Brad Treliving. Look what he's done already.
Yeah.
As he put it on the radio or in his interview, he said we needed some more snot.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
In, which he did. He brought in some guys that can play, but play like with a little bit more grit and determination and that sort of thing. Maybe not Klingberg, but the rest of them.
Bertuzzi and Domi and
and Reeves.
Yeah.
He's a character too in the room and everything. I mean, I honestly think their biggest problem has been goaltending and probably lack of big mobile defensemen over the years.
Yeah.
And, and right now, I mean, they've got to do a little bit more on the blue line. And personally, that's just my, personal feelings. Samsonov's going to arbitration and he'll get his money. I don't know what they're going to do with Murray. I mean, they're going to have to put him on long-term IR or buy him out. I mean, they're $8.5 million over the cap, so they got to find that money somewhere. Muzzin will likely stay on long-term injury reserve. Murray may end up there, but you know what, I see something coming during the season. A pretty big trade.
Yeah.
With one,
I think it's going to be
one of the, as they call them, the core four.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about Nylander recently.
Yeah.
And different, things. His name's been thrown out there quite a bit as a possibility. It'll be really interesting to see what happens moving forward.
Yeah, I think it is. It's going to be, and that's one of the things when Brad came in, I listened to his press conference when he was named the general manager. And I loved what he said. He said, this isn't, we have that core four, we're going to look after them, but this isn't about the core four. This isn't about 4 guys, 2 guys, or 1 guy. This is about 23 guys that are on the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Right.
And I think, maybe Kyle Dubas looked at it differently.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure he knew he had that job in Pittsburgh before he did that press conference and tried to extort more money and power out of the Leafs. And then I'm pretty sure he knew he had the job and just wanted more power and more money. So,
yeah,
nothing against him. I thought he did a pretty good job while he was here, regular season wise. And then even this year, I thought he made some good moves at the deadline, but it almost seemed to me like what he did was to get by Tampa.
Yep. Yeah.
I don't think he was thinking ahead of that, and
right.
And maybe he just didn't do quite enough that would have gotten them past Florida. I don't know if they could have beat Florida even with a couple of more additions, but certainly it looked to me like he built that team. Okay, we just got to win that first round, and then I'm going to save my job, and everybody's going to be happy. And well, it doesn't work that way. I'm sorry. You got, when you win one round in 19 years, something's going to happen. And but I think Brad's come in and done a pretty good job. I think there's still more work to do. I'm still a big Leaf fan. I go to a lot of games. I mean, I hope they win a cup while I'm still alive.
Yeah. Well, if they make a few more of the right moves, I think it, could come soon. And maybe Brad's the guy to answer those questions and to make those moves. And in the next couple of years, we'll see that Leafs Cup. I think it would be good for the league, for the Leafs to win a cup, when you've got a team like that with the history that's there.
Well, maybe not if you ask Gary Bettman, but he'd rather see Vegas or New York or LA even, but but yeah, you know what? I think Brad's pretty smart guy. He went through some stuff like that in Calgary with Goudreau and Tkachuk.
Yeah.
I think he's prepared to do what he needs to do in order to make this team a team that can win a Stanley Cup.
Yep, I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we wrap up? I know it's hard because you've had a long career and there's been a lot of memorable moments and memorable stories, but is there, one that always a moment or a story that always just comes to mind when you look at your career and the journey you went through?
Oh boy. I mean, there's been a lot of ups and downs, obviously. I think probably, I'll say this. I think the biggest thing that I remember is the fact that the way we were treated, I guess, by not just the owners and keep in mind that there was 21 teams back then. There was probably only 4 or 5 that were run properly, organizations, Montreal, Edmonton, maybe a couple more. A lot of the owners were like Harold Ballard. And, but the way that we were just, we were a piece of meat,
Yeah.
Okay, trade them to Chicago 3 days before camp, trade them to Buffalo. And in that trade, Jerry Meehan, who's was a GM of Buffalo at the time, and we're still good friends, and I see him from time to time. And I couldn't believe he told me that Mike Keenan wanted to make that trade Christmas Day. And he said, we can't make that trade on Christmas Day. And Mike said, yeah, we can. There's no rule, which there wasn't back then. There was no trade freeze or anything like that. And Jerry just said, I am not trading a player on Christmas Day. That's just not going to do it. And so they waited until the next day. But you know what? There's a lot of great memories, a lot of great things that happened. I think it was, again, it was more what my family had to go through, with all those trades and everything, that probably was the worst part of playing those 13 years in the best league in the world.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, there's hockey families have to, it's a long season. The NHL is a long season. You got a lot of time devoted into it that you're not spending with your family, or, you've got to all of a sudden up and move because you got traded. And
well, you look now and you see they have people that help you find houses. They do everything for you now. I mean, I remember when Ryan McDonough got traded from the Rangers to Tampa. I think he didn't get there for a week and a half. They just said, take your time when you get everything all settled and you get your family ready to come down, and they probably already had a real estate person finding a house for them down there, someone selling their house in New York. Well, I mean, it was a little bit different when I played, and you just had to hop on a plane and leave, and you didn't know when you were going to see your family again. So that was probably the toughest part of my 13 years in the league.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's one good thing that's changed in the league, know what?
I'll be honest with you. I like it. I like the fact that players have the power they have now.
Right.
That they're able to make the money that they're making, and they have power. They have, the PA is probably as powerful as it's ever been. And I think it's great for the game. Because when I look back at when Al Eagleson was running it, I mean, it was, pardon my language, but it was a shit show. He ran it, like the way he wanted to, and put a lot of money in his pocket at the same time. So times have changed. The players have a lot more power. I think that's fantastic for the game.
Oh, yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
Well, Rick, thank you very much for coming on. You had an amazing career, and you shared a lot of that with us. A legend in the NHL, and especially a legend for the Toronto Maple Leafs organization and part of the history there. So thank you very much. It's been awesome to talk to you. Thanks for joining me.
No problem, Alex. I love, telling my stories, and that's one of the reasons why I wrote my book, Catch 22. I heard a lot of people talking about, athletes in NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, NHL. Oh, their lives must have been great. They must be living like kings. And, and I thought, when you look at the four major leagues, I would bet 40% of the players that make it had to go through tough times in order to get there. And, and some of them coming out of bad neighborhoods, had to get the heck out of there, earned a college degree, and that sort of thing. So I just wanted the fans to know that, it's not quite that simple.
Yeah. People don't see that when they just see all the glory. They don't see the rest of it.
And that's, I know my challenges coming out of PEI, and, we didn't have a lot of money or anything. And, but my parents made it work, and, they sacrificed so that we could, that I could make that journey. And I just wanted people to realize that it's not all that easy. It's not all roses.
Yeah, I think that's well put. Thanks again for taking some time out of your night.
My pleasure, Alex. Thank you very much.